Social media plays a huge role in the television industry nowadays. Where the internet and traditional TV used to be regarded as competitors in the entertainment market, the relationship is now more symbiotic. When a show goes viral, whether due to its genuine merit or just being shocking and attention-grabbing in nature, social media companies benefit from the boost in users caused by fan interactions surrounding the show, and networks get massive free advertising for their productions. But I worry this is yet another aspect of the entertainment industry that's good for business and not for art. The 2022 anime adaptation of Spy Family is an example of this scenario. The show had lots of short and funny clips, especially with Anya, that easily gained traction on social media and invoked the curiosity of the masses who wanted to learn more about this fascinating family of secret agents. And when anime fans at large gave the show glowing praise, rocketing it up to the top of my anime list, it only further built the hype for people who were clearing their schedules to watch it. I was one of those people, and while I really fell in love with the first few episodes, the show didn't end up being as special as I thought, or as how social media had made it out to be. It almost seemed to garner the reputation that it was too big to fail after season 1's initial success, leaving part 2 to feel like it lacked a lot of the show's strengths and didn't put in the effort to make a memorable impression like part 1 did. Much like Anya's favorite snack of peanuts, it was a mixed bag. Season 1 of Spy Family has an exceptionally strong start. It pretty quickly takes us into the action of the story, saving just enough time for exposition that gives this quirky family's antics weight in the grander scope of world events of a Cold War between the East and West. Each member of the Forger family is given a well-established and distinct character from the beginning. Lloyd, the disciplined perfectionist, Yor, the anxious but well-meaning protector, and Anya, the energetic young adventurer who often gets in over her head. Everyone has unique personalities that make them engaging to follow, but more importantly, they all have strong foundations for interesting character arcs that would mesh well with their found family dynamic. Each Forger has their alter egos where they become a more confident version of themselves, whether it be a skilled spy, a ruthless assassin, or an all-knowing psychic. They each fight for good in their own way, but these heroic personas often serve as a cover for deeper vulnerabilities within themselves which could be perfectly solved by some good old family bonding. The show's overall plot could also play to similar strengths, underscoring fun episodic adventures with the high stakes of Wise's spy operations. I love this kind of stuff, when shows mix lighthearted adventure with more intense moments of drama, so I was super excited to see where Spy Family would go with it. Part 1 of Season 1 delivers on this promise. Spy Family entertains with episodic family antics while still letting each storyline have an impact on the overall plot progression. Most episodes serve as a step forward or backwards towards the overall goal of making contact with Donovan Desmond, while also following each of the family members' individual goals. Lloyd fights to balance his objectives as a spy with his responsibilities of raising a happy family, and he learns to be more patient with Yor and Anya. Yor feels unfit to be a wife and mother after spending her life as a solitary assassin, but with her family's encouragement, she learns to embrace her kind-hearted nature. Anya struggles with feeling insufficient and having to rise to the challenge of helping her father's efforts as a spy, and she continues to push herself to overcome the obstacles in her path to saving the world. Along with the character development of the Forger family, interesting plot threads and conflicts are introduced regularly throughout the first part, such as the bratty son of Donovan, Damien Desmond, or Yor's overprotective brother Yuri, who secretly works for Lloyd's enemies. Additionally, there's a nice balance of victories and defeats for the Forgers throughout the season. Anya may have been punished with a tonitrus? We're gonna do our best. Anya may have been punished with a tonitrus bolt for stalking Damien in episode 6, but her self-sacrificing in attempting to save a young boy from drowning earns her a Stella in episode 11. Each episode of part 1 provides a fun scenario or interesting obstacle for the Forgers to overcome that often has a strong impact on the story overall. It's an impressive blend of engaging character drama and slice-of-life comedy that makes for an engaging watch throughout, and it's a promising indication of greater challenges to come as the plot progresses. Spy Family was very unique in its storytelling, combining tense moments of action with comedic scenarios and using both to further develop the members of the family. The first 3 episodes of part 2 exemplify this perfectly. These episodes encompass the Doggy Crisis arc, and as the name indicates, it is an intense series of events. This arc opens part 2 of season 1 with a bang, and really leans into the spy angle of the show, demonstrating its strong ability to do high-stakes plot lines. At the same time though, these episodes still have that classic Spy Family charm to them, providing lighter, more comedic moments that capitalize capitalize on the Forge's dynamic without compromising the overall tension. Much of this storyline is centered around Lloyd being tasked with stopping a terrorist bombing that could launch Westalis and Ostania into war. But it's also about Anya working with a dog that can see the future to prevent Lloyd from accidentally triggering the explosive. It does sound tonally jarring and ridiculous from the description, and while I wasn't exactly on the edge of my seat with fear watching this episode, it kept me entertained throughout and never felt like a mishmash of contradictory elements. It proved the show's potential to create engaging drama with these characters, and the more wholesome moments actually served as a complementary contrast that heightened the sense of relief after resolving a tense climax. The struggle to disable the bomb served as an exciting conflict, but Anya's passionate defense of Bond and Lloyd finally adopting the dog to make her happy was the more emotionally meaningful scene of the episode. For me, it represented everything that made Spy Family special. But then, as the episodes rolled on into the later half of season 1, it didn't feel so special anymore. Honestly, it started to feel kind of mid-tier. But Spy Family is the greatest anime of our time! TikTok told me so! Ironically, I feel like the tendency of this show to have viral clips on social media actually indicates what made Part 2 feel so weak to me. For Part 2, the anime fully leans into episodic storylines and wacky, nonsensical plots that barely have any impact on the overall plot or characters, and are often just built for the sake of telling a joke. I remember seeing a viral clip on Instagram that admittedly did alert me to the fact that Part 2 had arrived in the first place, of Anya's school friend singing a dumb little song while Damien busted a move like nobody's business. It's pretty funny, gave me a little chuckle or two, mostly for Damien's goofy dance, but by the time I sat down and watched the full episode, I realized that just the short clip basically had the same effect. The full plot really didn't have any effect on the journey of the characters or on the show's overall story, and it literally gets erased in the end when it turns out George Gluman wasn't going bankrupt and he shows up to school the next day. It was all just a joke that I could have enjoyed in a funny compilation online. Now, I get it. Here's the part where everybody accuses me of being a pretentious YouTube critic who hates anything fun or happy after watching Evangelion for the first time. I'll elaborate more on this idea a little later, but I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with Spy Family leading into its comedic side. I just feel like the show could do even better than that by combining exaggerated comedy with meaningful character growth, because, you know, it did that for the entire first part of season 1, where in part 1, we got a variety of creative episodes with funny plotlines that usually still resulted in character or plot development to some extent. There are multiple storylines like George's where everything is built purely on wacky scenarios, only for it to have no impact on the show overall and the status quo to be completely reset at the end. To go from a show that at least vaguely follows an overarching narrative structure to something that is pure sketch comedy is jarring. Watching each episode seemingly ignore the driving force of the main plot and characters, advancing Operation Strix and meeting with Donovan Desmond, makes it hard for the viewer to stay motivated or invested in the adventures of these characters. Since they're not tangibly making progress towards the goal, the only reason to be engaged with episodes of Part 2 is for the pure entertainment value of watching these characters get into comedic hijinks. And while I think it is inferior to the blend of comedy and storytelling in Part 1 of the anime, my monkey brain certainly isn't above watching goofy shows just for the fun of it. The problem is, these later episodes especially aren't all that funny. I understand that while everything in this video is subjective, humor is probably the most subjective aspect, and it's not as easy to talk about in broad terms as something like narrative structure, at the risk of sounding like a heartless comedy tyrant who callously deems what is funny and unfunny. I'm just gonna start listing off episodes that were and were not funny to communicate my point. Spy Family has a pretty standard sense of humor that fits the tropes of anime comedy, although it does a fairly nice job of staying away from becoming too over the top and annoying. One example of this in Part 2 is the Investigate the General Hospital plotline of episode 20. We follow Anya and Lloyd on a take your child to work day at this hospital, only for wacky hijinks to ensue as Anya tries to discover Lloyd's secret spy operations. With Spy Family revolving around a family that doesn't know about each other's secret identities, the comedic misunderstanding is a common setup for jokes. But episode 20 demonstrates the show's strength of taking this setup and providing enough creative variations on the format to keep it fresh. This episode capitalizes on Lloyd and Anya's dynamic in order to draw out more humor from their contrasting personalities that makes this tropey misunderstanding comedy unique to them. Anya's natural curiosity and well-meaning ignorance gets her into trouble throughout the episode, which causes an unexpected break in Lloyd's serious demeanor as he scrambles to keep her under control. The unique setting and plot further adds to the comedy, as Anya's over-the-top determination to find out as much information as possible for her work report causes chaos in a normally professional and orderly setting like a hospital. Overall, it doesn't feel like it's trying to be funny, and instead lets humor naturally flow out of unexpected situations. On the other hand, episode 17 is one that I have declared to be not funny. The carry out the Griffin plan plotline of this episode follows a now well well-established formula of Anya's school antics without any comedic innovations. I suppose I better not beat around the bush too much, but my feelings about this episode touch on an oddly controversial point of discussion within the fandom concerning whether Anya is funny or not. Anya critics often paint her style of comedy to just be, "Look at this funny face," or "Aren't kids so funny?" and they find its simplicity insulting to their advanced, more intelligent sense of humor. Generally, I disagree with this point and don't find Anya to be annoying. While I'm not laughing my lungs out at everything she does, the show does a good job of contrasting her unassuming appearance with some unexpected actions that creates a humorous subversion of expectations, and her childish actions are portrayed in a fairly grounded way so that they don't become irritating rather than funny. But I have to admit, I was feeling a bit of Anya fatigue by the end of part 2, and I think episode 17 accurately captures how she became more annoying. Most of her jokes in this episode come from her making a goofy face or saying something in a goofy way, with no real thought put into how these moments are used and instead just spamming them throughout the whole episode. Unlike episode 20, which had a few moments of Anya hijinks, like discovering Lloyd's secret passage and accidentally becoming a vent ghost, the over-exaggeration of everything Anya does in the hopes that it'll get a laugh loses exactly what makes those moments funny in the first place: the fact that it's unexpected. Now, even the most mundane responses or actions have to be accompanied by a meme face or crazy reaction, which quickly makes the humor lose its effect. This Anya problem is somewhat present throughout the whole of part 2, but the other aspects of episode 17 make this a particularly bad case. Damien's own flavor of over-exaggerated anger wasn't notably humorous in the first place, and it only feels worse in this episode, making Anya's strange behavior feel more annoying rather than highlight the comedy of it. There isn't much situational comedy to be found either, as there aren't any unexpected events like in episode 20 to make the basic Anya and Damien fight plot structure engaging. The only variation from the formula is having Anya and Damien's failed sculpture be mistaken for an avant-garde creation and win first place in the contest, but that's such a cliche in itself that it was completely unsurprising. The Carry Out the Griffin Plan plot exemplified how Spy Family's humor, as well as the storytelling in general, had declined from the first half, as it tries too hard to make viral, LOL random moments instead of letting the relationships of its entertaining cast of characters naturally create funny situations. Look, I know things have been getting a bit negative in this review, but I don't want to give the impression that I completely hated part 2 of season 1. These flaws were more like a handicap to my enjoyment rather than fully preventing me from liking these episodes. I still had a good time with the episodes following the 3-part opener. After all, there's nothing that can stop me from liking the Forger family. Even if Anya's humor started to wear a bit thin on me, I still enjoyed the greater part of her antics, and the few moments that the Forger family did get to grow together in this half of the season did make me happy. As long as no one comes along to disturb this piece, as long as an annoying woman with freaky eyelashes and a greasy white haircut doesn't show up to make the show all about her because she's a self-absorbed weirdo. It's time to talk about Fiona Frost. I did not care for her, if you couldn't tell at this point. Introduced in episode 21, Fiona Frost, or Nightfall, is a fellow wise agent who ends up trying to insert herself into Lloyd's spy operation and take over the role of being his wife. She's even colder than Lloyd and has an unhealthy commitment to her work, with many agents mentioning that she's more focused on moving up the ranks of wise rather than just doing her job. Seeing Yor as too clumsy and weak-willed to be a proper wife for Lloyd's mission, Fiona takes the opportunity to interrogate her in private and try to scare her into giving up her role. At first, it seems like this is only because she wants to secure the success of the mission, but it's revealed through Anya's telepathy that she has a girlish crush on Lloyd and actually kind of wants to be his wife. Admittedly, I like this episode as a whole. Introducing a foil character to challenge one of the protagonists is a classic way to bring about character growth and help them overcome their flaws. From a very logical outlook, Fiona would be much more efficient as Lloyd's wife to furthering Operation Strix, with her rigid sense of discipline and ability to be transparent with him about being spies. And she does a good job in this episode of forcing Yor to confront her insecurities about being Lloyd's partner. Still, I do wish the show had played more into the angle of Fiona being a housewife, because it's pretty clear from her stoic demeanor that she's not actually going to work well with Anya or Lloyd. Maybe if she at least kept up the appearance of a typical housewife, acting polite and cheerful in order to conceal her more unforgiving qualities, she would have posed a more genuine threat to Yor, who struggles with the superficial aspects of being a mom like cooking and cleaning. As the episode is, though, Fiona doesn't cause any significant conflict and is pretty quickly rejected by Lloyd along with viewers as a whole. Still, this fast resolution fits the structure of a 20-minute episode, and we're able to get a moment of growth for Yor and the family as a whole when Anya proves her attachment to her mother. The episode even ends on a surprisingly sad and atmospheric scene for the show. We get a look into Fiona's intense devotion to being a spy and how she feels that Lloyd has fallen from grace, allowing her to also serve as a foil for Lloyd, who is starting to open up and form true emotional connections with his found family. But Fiona isn't just here for one episode. She gets an entire mini arc with her senpai about them infiltrating an underground underground illegal tennis ring. Never before have I felt such anger at the sport of tennis than I did with these episodes. The Campbellton tennis arc was incredibly random in a way that was more jarring than interesting. We follow Lloyd and Fiona as they pose as a tennis-playing couple and overcome various cheats used by the owner of the competition to try to stack the odds against them. Where problems in Spy Family often required a mix of skill and intelligence to solve, fitting the spy genre, most of the challenges in these episodes boil down to just hit the ball harder. There isn't much entertainment to be found in the humor either, as Fiona's initially surprising secret of being a Lloyd fangirl is now repeated in a word-for-word manner that makes it lose its effect because, you know, the humor came from the fact that it was surprising. By the end of this strange tennis battle, we find out from the handler that the secret code Lloyd and Fiona were after didn't even have anything to do with Operation Strix anyway, so there isn't even any effect on the plot progression from all of this. This basically boils the whole value of episodes 22 and 23 to whether or not you thought they were fun to watch, and if you're like me, you're probably gonna have a bad time with them. Still, the one saving grace of this arc is that it presents an opportunity for some interesting conflict and character growth. Fiona's main motivation throughout this mission is to, once again, prove her value to Lloyd and convince him to abandon Yor. This could be an interesting challenge to the status quo if Lloyd cared. At all. He spends most of the episodes being mildly confused by Fiona and wishing that she would just do her job as a spy rather than try to impress him. So a potentially interesting internal conflict for Lloyd about choosing a partner based on reason or emotional connection is ruined by having no tension. I understand that everyone knows Lloyd and Yor will stay as partners, but at least let Lloyd consider replacing her with Fiona for 5 seconds. A similar problem occurs when Fiona confronts Yor at the end of episode 23, as their conflict feels very hollow and doesn't even have to do with their ability to be a good wife, but rather who's stronger at tennis. Yor does at least get a moment to prove herself once again, and Fiona runs off brokenhearted, knowing that Yor has earned her place with Lloyd. As a concept, I don't hate Fiona's storyline in season 1, and her debut in episode 21 does serve as an instance of it being implemented successfully. Being an efficient agent, she serves as a tangible threat to Yor as Lloyd's partner, and his eventual rejection of her reinforces the show's theme about the value of family and opening up to the people that care about you. But as Spy Family tries to drag out her story, it becomes painfully obvious that Lloyd is completely opposed to the idea of working with her, and Yor is perfectly qualified to be his wife. The humor and character intrigue of Fiona quickly goes stale, and it creates that feeling of these episodes being meaningless antics that have no effect on the show, which has been the cause of problems for much of part 2. The one benefit I can say is that these episodes are an unnecessarily long build-up to episode 24, which felt like a refreshing return to form for Spy Family. Watching Lloyd and Yor work through their complicated relationship in a comedic way while getting to share a genuinely sentimental moment at the end was a lot more enjoyable than the tennis adventures, and I was happy to see them make progress in overcoming their fears of emotional vulnerability and failure. Episode 24 in general was a highlight of part 2. Becky's unexpected character development was a nice surprise, but episode 25 falls back into the problems some of the other episodes had. As the finale of season 1, this episode does give us the climactic moment of Lloyd and Donovan's first face-to-face encounter, something we've been building towards since the first episode. Yet despite having such a long build-up, their conversation is short-lived and barely changes the status quo. The only thing Lloyd is able to accomplish is to make a good impression on Donovan and get him to remember his name, which basically puts us back to square one until Donovan decides to act on this information. I don't think the show needs to immediately rush us into the final boss battle and have Lloyd discover all the information he needs to know about Donovan right away, but I think it would have felt more satisfying if Donovan at least dropped some piece of information or clue that could start us on a new path for the next season. Now it feels like we're heading into the next season with no direction since there's no more special investigation or work Lloyd can do on his own. He just has to wait to meet up with Donovan again. I do appreciate that this finale doesn't rush us to a leap in progress with Donovan, but putting the ball completely in his court leaves our protagonist feeling aimless until he decides to recontact them. I think this kind of episode would have worked much better as a mid-season finale that raises the tension but doesn't progress the plot. At the end of the season though, it'd be better to finish with something that has a more tangible impact on the status quo. This sentiment is the source for a lot of my mixed feelings on part 2 of Spy Family. The show became much more episodic with less episodes that contributed to the overall development of the plot or characters, and more comedic sketches that ended with the status quo being reset. Part 2 does have its moments, such as with Yor, Becky, and Damien, where the characters do wrestle with internal challenges and change for the better. But as a whole, these episodes didn't did not have the same streamlined feel that Part 1 had, where each comedic adventure had some contribution to the growth of the characters or plot. I think that this criticism hits on a common rebuttal for defenders of Spy Family, so I might as well address it here. Spy Family is a slice of life show. It's not supposed to have a complex plot or deep characters, it's just supposed to be wholesome entertainment. I get where this argument is coming from, and despite being a YouTube reviewer, I still hate people that take shows too seriously and refuse to watch media just for enjoyment rather than refined artistic merit. But I think this is one case where it is disingenuous to say that a show is just slice of life and its only goals is to have self-contained sketch comedy episodes. People now like to talk about Spy Family like it's the disastrous life of Psyche K or the way of the house husband, but that was never the impression I got from fans before I watched the show or as I watched part 1 of season 1. If anything, it felt a bit like a family-friendly Cowboy Bebop, where the episodes focused on fun missions and weren't always completely connected, yet still worked towards an overall goal and followed the journeys of its main characters. While I don't expect Spy Family to have the moody character introspection of Cowboy Bebop, from the beginning it had a similar format of presenting each episode with a unique mission that had a tangible effect on the plot or changed the characters in some way. It also wasn't as completely carefree and flippant as some fans make it out to be. It had a fair mix of family antics as well as serious moments, and it especially treated Lloyd's spy work with seriousness and gave those plot events a sense of higher stakes because, well, world peace was usually on the line. This unique blend of tension and lightheartedness is what made Spy Family work so well for me and many other fans. So I think it's a discredit to the show to deflect criticism by saying it's just slice of life. Maintaining that contrast between high-stakes operations and peaceful family life is the emotional core of the show. It reflects Lloyd's internal struggle over whether or not he can enjoy a happy life with his new family or have to sacrifice his own interests for the sake of the world. There's nothing inherently wrong with Spy Family being a cute slice of life show, but it could be something amazing if it embraces its more dramatic side. Unfortunately, I felt that part 2 dropped the ball on that in some respects. Still, I think it's an exaggeration to call it a disaster. I really do love season 1, but there were just some flaws that tempered my enjoyment that I hope are improved in the future. As long as the show stays focused on its overall direction and keeps a steady pace instead of wasting time on completely pointless shenanigans, I'll be happy with it. And hey, I'm trying not to be annoying, which is impossible for an anime fan, and keep a measured opinion about the whole thing, because I think the online discussion has hurt some people's viewpoints on Spy Family. As expected, the most hyperbolic opinions of "this show is a flawless masterpiece" and "this show is pure trash" are getting the most attention online, when in reality, I think season 1 is much more of a mixed bag. Thanks for watching this review, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!